This is not your first podcast, right? You're no stranger to podcasts. You've even hosted your own in the past, right? You've interviewed guests like Tom Daley, the Olympic diver, Reggie Yates, the radio DJ, and many other highly talented and successful people. Was there anything specifically that you learned from these guests? It could be the people I mentioned. It could be somebody else. Was there anything that really stuck with you and had an impact?
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed a range of really brilliant, interesting guests. In terms of things that I've learned, I guess on reflection, and then they each had something unique to bring.
Yeah.
But I think what I learned was that what the golden thread between all of them and their success and their well-being in life, amidst challenges, right, was their expression of authenticity in the world. In other words, not trying to be someone else, like just being their weird self, being their unique self. I think they all seem to share that as a trait, and I think that's really important. And to come back to your previous question, I think it links to that as well, like feeling like we can be ourselves in life, at work, etc. I think that's really important. I think I found out the other day that the most searched for word last year was authenticity. I think that's something that people are struggling to know exactly what that means in today's world, but something that people really want. And I think those guests that I interviewed each were really authentic. They were themselves, and they were open with their challenges and their lives, really. So yeah, that's what stood out.
I definitely agree with you there. Yeah, you picked like a good bunch of guests if authenticity and being genuine was what you were going for, right? That definitely was the thread across those people. And it's a big problem in today's world with imposter syndrome, because people they feel like they can't be themselves, and they feel like they're being somebody else and whatever, and then that really drags on their mental health.
Definitely.
Because if you open up Instagram, it's probably the worst thing for your mental health, right? Just scrolling through and seeing the perfect version of what everybody's life is, when in reality, it's not really, what you see online. We all put a persona on, we all put an image on, we all pretend to be an exaggerated version of what we are. And then that can really have an effect on people's mental health if all they're seeing is the good and not the bad. And they think, oh, why aren't I like those people? Why aren't I, achieving those things? Some of the people that you mentioned there, they've gone through big challenges publicly, and they've had to face that, with loads of cameras looking at them. Tom Daley being an obvious example, right?
Yeah. Tom Daley, Frank Bruno. His name eludes me. The musician from Busted. Now, but they've all gone through their challenges, and they face them with real humanity, right? You mentioned imposter syndrome there. Like I know it's something that many people encounter today, and I think it's certainly magnified by social media. But that's something that I experienced, not necessarily because of social media, but because of becoming a founder without a prior business background, right? And then all of a sudden becoming a founder of like a company of a few hundred people, and then an executive, all those kinds of things, and the supposed connotations that come with that. Then you think, oh, I need to be X and Y. And in the beginning, my approach was to focus on the things I didn't have, like my weaknesses. I need to get these right. I need to be a certain type of person to fit this, right? And that I really struggled because of that. Like, it made me unhappy, probably made me less impactful in my role. And the switch, which relates to what we just said, was forgetting that and really just leaning into who I was and recognizing my unique strengths that I had, and which might have been perceived as weaknesses before, but really leaning into who I was. And when I started to do that, then started feeling far more fulfilled at work, far more impactful. I'd say my performance increased. And I think it's an invitation for us to not compare, but to really like dig in to what our unique offering is, and then to double down on that, right? And that, it's our strengths, it's our personality, that's our calling, all that kind of stuff. I think it's an important switch to make if you are trying to be something else or someone else and focusing on your flaws.
It's one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given, really. And they said, Alfie, stop trying to fix all the areas where you're not so strong. Instead, just spend that time double downing on your strengths, because there's certain things that I'm good at that I'm really good at, right? But then the majority of things I'm pretty shit at, right? Like, so I just need to focus on my unique skills and that sort of thing. Not to say that you can improve and learn in the other areas where you are not that good at. You, I know you're quite into that whole journey. You did an interview on the Researching Happy podcast a while back, and you talked that you read a lot, and reading books is really important to you. Are there any specific books that you would recommend listeners read, most of the audience are tech entrepreneurs and founders and software engineers and investors and people building cool things in tech. But obviously your angle has been very health tech and mental health focused. But is there anything in particular that people should be reading that are listening to this today?
I read a lot, and I got loads of books and loads. I was going to say loads of interest. They typically focus within like psychology, spirituality, human development, potential, all that kind of thing. To be honest, like I would say the books that one should focus on, like as a founder or entrepreneur, like probably aren't the traditional ones you might expect that are about business. I would say they're the ones that are more that serve your expression of your potential as a human being. I think that can have an outsized impact on your capacity as a founder. So with that in mind, sure, there's loads, right? There's a book called I and Thou by Martin Buber, philosopher, and that's a good book in terms of how to relate with others. It's I and thou versus I and it. I and thou being recognizing common humanity in the person you're speaking with or being with, versus seeing them as objects, as utility, like seeing them through the lens of utility, which can happen in a workplace, right? And as a founder, you might see people through just the lens of utility, but it's really important that we don't. So I think I and Thou is a great book. Loads. I mean, I read a lot of Krishnamurti and Osho. That's more around just tapping into one's, I guess you could say, potential through more of a spiritual lens. There is an author, her name's Carol Sanford, and she's a systems theorist, but she's really pushes the boundaries in terms of how we think about our organizations and our roles in them. She's transcended the traditional mechanistic thing, but also then transcended the humanistic paradigm, which is we are here to save everyone within the organization. We're the hero, and she transcends it as well. And she just really invites us to think about our roles in work and in life in new ways. So that's what comes to mind, but I've got loads of recommendations I could make.
How do you tend to listen to books? Let's say listen, is it Audible or do you read physical paper books or a Kindle, or what's your process?
I read books.
Yeah.
Paper books primarily. I mean, I gave away about 500 books before coming to England, and I've got probably about 1,000 books now. As much as I can keep in my house, I get paper books, but then I'll revert to Kindle sometimes. Sometimes I'll listen, but I find that I just like to have the books. I like to take notes and all the rest, highlight. Yeah, so reading books, the paper.
I'm the same. It's my preference, and I really destroy them, to be honest, Steve. I like I like underline and circle it and rip pages out and staple them together. And I often, how you got like a few blank pages at the front and the back usually to take notes.
Yeah.
I often will run out and I'll end up like bringing A4 paper over and stapling it on to make it an edition. It's something that I miss since I've had my kid. It's been completely audiobooks, to be honest, because you have to really learn how to multitask. But I'm excited for when he gets a little bit older and I can finally go back to the 500 books I have not read yet, which have been staring at me every single day on my shelf and making me feel bad. But
you're right. I understand that the challenge and not having time, it's so important to engage with the book. Like there's a book I read called Optionality, but that one I really engage with. It's got tears and so much stuff in it, but it's one that really sticks with me because I engage with it. And just quickly to come back to, I mentioned Carol Sanford. So her latest books, she has after each chapter something that she calls intermezzos, and they are questions to prompt reflection. But so in other words, what she's trying to invite is not read my book and then take my ideas. It's like, how do these ideas work in you? What do they make you think? And how do you want to then apply this? In other words, shifting it from just read knowledge to something that you're going to actually embed in your life and turn them into your insights versus just taking insights, if you know what I mean. And I think working with a book like that can really yield that.
And really take action on the ideas as well, because if you read 500 books but don't do anything, then what's the point? It's much better to read 5 books and then have a few bullet points on each of them. And it's something that I was very, very guilty of for a long, long time. And my justification was, I'm getting smarter. It's it's helping me. It's helping my mindset, whatever. Yeah. But I wasn't really moving myself forward much. It was just kind of it was just like knowledge porn. It just kept going around in my mind. It was like a lovely idea, but it wasn't actually practical. something I've really tried to do more often, Steve, is finish a book, go through all my highlights, trying to condense it down on a Notion document to a couple of bullet points and specific actions that I can take, and then add them to my calendar, because then at the end of the book, I've turned it into a bit of an action guide and a couple of steps. And even if it's just one or two things, it's better to do that rather than just absorb the theory and live in that information, which can be a bit of a challenge though as well, right? Because it means that instead of reading like a book a week, it can be like a book every 2 or 3 weeks, because I spend so much time actually working on the steps involved rather than just going on to the next one. But it's more practical, if that makes sense.
Exactly. I mean, I've had to, because what I do is I read 10 books at once, typically, which is not what you're saying here, and I think your approach is a sound one. I almost do bits of both. There's some books where I'm going to deep dive in, and then there's others where I'll read a bunch of books on a similar but not the same topic, but I like to then draw like insights from all of them and then like synthesize into new ideas. And so I think for me it's a bit of both approaches, and I think that both have value. But I've had to work hard on not just reading like thousands of books at once. And
yeah, I'm with
that's
you.
my tendency.
It's like a chapter of one, and then the next one comes out, and you're like, okay, I'll do a chapter of that, and then